Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox Live. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson, and today we are talking about a pretty popular topic. I don't know, I've heard about it through the grapevine. GitHub Copilot. Have you heard of it?
You know, little thing we occasionally talk about, people at
Yeah,
conferences, occasionally
maybe
on the
once or twice at
street,
conferences. Yeah.
they go, "Hey, what's that on your hat?" And you're just like,
Right,
"Hey."
yeah, it's just there. Cool. So join me today to talk about GitHub Copilot and everything going on with it at the moment is Brian Randell. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. It's great to see you on video, Leslie. You and I were both in Seattle for Build, and it's nice to be
Yeah,
covering, right? Little.
I agree. Yep. Like I know we were both running around all over the place and I unfortunately didn't get to run into you there, but shoot, yeah. But we did into each other all the way in Belgium, so that was pretty sweet.
Well, that's how I see all my friends, right? I don't see them in the U.S. It's like you have to
Right?
travel.
You just see him in a completely different country. It's like, what
Exactly.
are the odds? Sweet. So, Brian, can you share a little bit more about yourself before we talk about Copilot?
Absolutely. So for forever, I was a non-Microsoft / GitHub employee. I was a Microsoft MVP for 17 years. Um, Talking about technology and how it makes our lives better is a bit of joy for me, and I love writing code. And luckily, just after the pandemic, I was able to get a job, a wonderful job, working at GitHub, and now I'm part of the wonderful developer relations team where I get paid to do this. This is just awesome.
That's pretty
Share the
awesome.
joy that is GitHub and working with all the technology. And I think we're in this amazing time, right? You go through these periods, like for me, having been around a bit, it was like, the internet and then, mobile devices and now AI and how, I get to be a part of something. I think that's one of the things I love. And I'm sure you agree, Leslie, being at Microsoft is the impact we can have just doing our job on the greater good. And, I really believe things like Copilot can help us if we work on it appropriately. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely feel the same way as you when it comes to like being able to leave some kind of impact like that. I think is really cool. Like most recently for me, working on like .NET Aspire, which just went GA post build alongside lots of
Congratulations.
Copilot things.
Yay.
Thank you. Yeah, so exciting. Actually, if you've been watching on .NET or the community stand up right now, which is still happening, if you're coming from Twitch, I believe they're actually talking about Aspire over there. So shout out to some of my colleagues who are awesome and are talking about everything great about it and why you should adopt it. But if you're coming from Twitch because you were going to watch this show about Copilot, welcome. We'll be back on Twitch soon. I think once the Aspire folks finish chatting about how awesome Aspire is. So yeah, but over here we're going to talk about how awesome GitHub Copilot is, which has had a lot of evolution and change in a really short amount of time. I mean, it was
Absolutely.
yeah, like I mean, also at Build, it was very much a hot topic. So we're going to talk about what's going on with it, everything we need
Uh,
to know, right?
yeah, that's this is kind of what I call the state of the nation. We're just gonna remind you of some of the great things Copilot does in the context of Visual Studio, probably my favorite IDE. And then we're going to just look at different places you can touch on it, talk about some of the announcements, and I'm going to give you tons of great links for places to go read, get information, and get started with the new features. So again, this is kind of that. Make it easy for you right before lunch. Just give you lots of good information, and that's, by the way, if you're on the West Coast, which I am. Obviously, if it's East Coast, it's a little later. And welcome anyone who's watching from other parts of the world, particularly Europe, and anyone in Pac Asia. You're awesome if you're here at this hour. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, dedication.
Absolutely. So where do you want to get started? Do you want to share my screen and we'll just get at it?
Yeah, let's do it. And also, of course, if you have any questions along the way about all things Copilot or GitHub Copilot specifically, there's so many Copilots. So the GitHub Copilot one, then feel free to ask in the chat.
Exactly. So to start, you'll see that I'm on the github.com feature / Copilot homepage. This is your initial getting started. And you'll notice on the page right in the middle there's a get started. And you'll see that in a couple other places on github.com. This is the first impediment we run into. Surprisingly, at Build, we ran some hands-on labs where we had people come and try out Copilot right away. And it was interesting the number of people who did not have Copilot yet. In other words, not so much that they hadn't even paid for it, that they haven't tried it because they were able to go take advantage of the free trial. So the first thing I always tell people is, look, we'll give you 30 days. Go try it out. Give it a fair shake, and it will work in any of the IDEs that are supported. That means Visual Studio 2022, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio Code inside Codespaces. It'll work in our partner, JetBrains, has a bunch of different IDEs. So like maybe you'd like to use their PyCharm IDE to do Python. Great IDE for that. And finally, NeoVim. Those are all locations that you can try out Copilot from a developer perspective. And then we have supporting locations like GitHub Mobile, as well as the GitHub CLI. And so if you scroll down on this page, one of the things it'll do is talk about all the wonderful things, why Copilot's wonderful. But if you scroll down almost near the bottom, we keep going, there we go. Start a free trial. So this is available to anyone who has not tried Copilot before. And I encourage you to give it that fair shake. 30 days, do what you want with it, and give it a go. Now, sometimes people they don't even know they do because their business has decided to buy this for them. So one of the things I like to do is show people, what does it look like if I have Copilot, if I don't, etc. So let's start with the I don't have it at all. We'll switch over here to one of my test accounts called the Beazle bug. And you'll notice that I am logged in. And so if I come over here, you'll see an option that says Your Copilot. Now, if you click this, you don't have Copilot. Give us a try. It'll say, hey, sign up right now, do your 30-day trial. And if you want to keep it, this is what it'll cost you. So that's kind of what that looks like. Another way you can see this is if you go into your settings on your profile and you come down here to Copilot, it'll tell you that, hey, you don't have it, start a free trial. So that's what it looks like on github.com if you don't have it. And by the way, for GitHub Copilot for individuals and for business, we don't care where you keep your code. We don't care if you're using github.com. You can be using Azure DevOps, which is great. You can be using other products to store your code, a local Git server. We don't care. In fact, you don't even have to be using version control because Copilot for individuals, and just go back to that page, and for business is focused on that experience inside your development environment, your IDE. And in fact, if you scroll down the list here, you'll see some important distinctions. Chat, code completion, smart actions, and supported environments. And you'll notice the first two here are both showing you the IDE, CLI, and the mobile. It's only if you go with enterprise, which I'll show a little bit later, that you need to have your code in github.com. So that's kind of like the first thing I like to tell people. Does that make sense, Leslie, where we're going with that?
Totally. And so whether you're using a free trial or you paid for the whole experience, you get to use Copilot and basically whatever IDE that's supported that you want, right? So you don't have to get separate free trials or anything like that. Nice.
Exactly. Yeah. So for individual and business, the developer experience is the same. The biggest difference between business and individual is we give some more organizational controls, and you can find those down at the bottom here to explain what those are all about. Now, you'll notice there's a little bit of a price difference, et cetera. I don't get into that. Just give it a try and work it out with the business folks. Now, what a lot of people want to know then is, what does it look like if I have it through work? Well, let's come over here to my browser individual. So now if you're using it, this is my individual account, my personal account. So if I say Your Copilot, it'll tell me that you're using it as an individual. It's active in your account. And it provides me with the controls for what I want to do, such as matching public code and allowing GitHub to use my code snippets. So I have control as an individual. Now I want to show you real quick. Let me change users to one of my other demo users called Alex. And we switch to Alex, you'll see that Alex is getting it via enterprise. And notice how certain things are disabled, not enabled, allowed, etc. In other words, I don't have the drop downs. That's because an administrator is in control of that. So it's kind of the big difference you'll see. Now, all of these buttons here will take you to different documentation pages to help you get started with your particular thing. So let's maybe you want to try it out on chat in GitHub Mobile. So you click this link, and we'll take you to the doc page to get you started. So that's kind of like one of my first tips of the day, knowing what GitHub Copilot account you have and how to get started, how to get quick access to those docs.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I feel like, there's been so many Copilot demos in the past like year and a half or two, but I feel like we never talk about the more, I guess, logistical side of it all, which is, I think, just as important. It's maybe not as like amazing, but it's still important to see.
Yeah, I think, until it becomes something that's ubiquitous, where everybody has it, or we've hit, a certain tipping point. The numbers they announced to build were huge. It was, over 1 million developers, over 50,000 organizations are using GitHub Copilot. That's fantastic. But that's small in the number of developers when you consider, GitHub has over 100 million users. And so, until we start hitting, 50, 70 million, I'm going to keep making sure people know how to get started, try it for free. And of course, if you don't like it, give us your feedback. Tell us why you don't like it. What I remind folks as well is, Copilot's been out for a couple years.
Yeah.
So it's important to say, well, I tried it and it wasn't great. And by the way, I'll raise my hand. When I first tried it, when I first got access as an MVP, this is pre-pandemic, right? I was like, it's okay. But that's what I said about IntelliSense when it first came out, back with Visual Basic 5. And now, you're going to take away IntelliSense or statement completion with, from my
same, yeah. Because like us Microsofties, when we got asked to like dog food it, I was just like, okay, I guess. It's all right, but it's changed a lot in like a year. It's kind of ridiculous. So
yeah, and that's even the last year, it's changed dramatically, and I think part of that speaks to the evolution of both how we are understanding using AI, as well as the great partnership, right? GitHub Copilot in and of itself is something that is built with the partnership of Microsoft and our friends like JetBrains, et cetera. And as we're going to see with extensibility, even more partners. In other words, we're going to have a better together experience because of that partnership. And, I will admit, for someone like me who demos a lot of different environments, there's sometimes subtle differences. And it's like, oh, but the flip side is, understanding the mindset of the person who uses the tool. A developer who lives in NeoVim is going to be a different developer than who lives in Visual Studio, for example. It's just the very nature. And same thing with VS Code and those different personas, right? Web developers versus, say, mobile. And so we're always looking to bring the best experience for that developer. And that's what I'm going to show today is when we look at how we use it in Visual Studio.
Cool. And you got a couple of questions in chat. So this one we kind of already talked about, but yeah, is GitHub Copilot only available for Visual Studio?
No, Copilot's available for Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio 2022 on Windows, by the way. We don't support the Mac version, which is going away, sadly. We support multiple JetBrains IDEs like PyCharm. And finally, we support NeoVim. Those are the current 4 IDEs or development environments. Then you can also use it in the mobile client. You get your mobile phone out, log into the GitHub client, and you can actually talk to Copilot there. And finally, you can use it from the CLI. So if you fire up a terminal environment, and if I were to say, come on, baby, there we go. GitHub Copilot, whoops, there we go. You'll see that we have an extension that you install with the GitHub client, and there it is. So I can say stuff like, GitHub Copilot suggest. Well, there we go. I've even got a nice item there telling me, hey, how do I create an issue in the current repo?
Is that Copilot suggestion for a prompt there too? That's
exactly. So there was a quick demo. Here's how you create a GitHub issue from the command line using the GitHub client.
That's really fun. I haven't actually seen it get used that much in the a command line context.
It's really great. What I love it is, someone who's spent, if we look back in my history of computers, I spent a bunch of time when I first started HP 3000 mini computers, so old school. Then Windows has been my life for about a good 25, but I also spend now every day on my Mac, and I do a lot more Linux. So for me, for example, bash commands. And so you can ask GitHub Copilot at the command line, how to do bash commands, how to do ZHS commands, how to do git commands, which, for example, how do I do a rebase? So if we go GH Copilot suggest git rebase, right? I can come over and say, well, tell me about the git command. And it says, okay, it's there. And I said, oh, well, explain this command to me. Oh, okay. So I can get the docs all without leaving my flow of being in the command line. And that's
that is great. Yeah.
Right.
This is great for like the people who love the terminal and just want to hang out in the command line all day. Like, it's nice to see that Copilot's just as powerful over in terminal space than it is.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. So to answer the question of the user, that's what you get with Copilot, individual or business, across the board, and of course enterprise, right? Now, enterprise has special features which I'll point out explicitly that we're going to talk about later that only work with GitHub.com. But right now, if you had an individual, you should be able to do what I just did, as well as use it in Visual Studio proper, Visual Studio Code, JetBrains IDEs, and finally, NeoVim.
Cool. I love it.
Now, you have another question?
Yep, there is another question. So it's kind of long. I'm going to do my best to summarize it. But there's a person talking about how they are currently using GitHub Copilot, but the customer that they're working with has their own Copilot license and wants that team to use their license. So in general, there's some concerns about like data leaks coming from the project code and like how that data is being used and stuff. So the question at the end of the day is, how can their team answer some of those data leak concerns that might worry some customers that they work with?
That's actually a great question. And the place I'm going to send you right now. Now, first of all, if you can't find the answer, feel free to follow me offline. I'm Octobrian at github.com. I'll do my best to answer questions, et cetera, and find it. But where I'm going to, again, teach you how to fish, so to speak, is if you come over here, you'll have the Git Copilot docs, a great place to start. And remember, all the links I'm showing will be in the video posting. But notice we also have something called the GitHub Copilot Trust Center. Ooh. This is the place to go for these kind of business, legal related questions. Okay. It'll talk about licensing usage, et cetera. And, when people worry about data leakage, let me be clear about one thing. When you're using the business or enterprise licenses, we don't keep any of your code. When you make a request to GitHub, it goes through HTTPS up to our backend server. And there's actually a diagram you'll see in one of the talks I'm going to send you to. But the bottom line is it goes up into the cloud. We're never sending your code carte blanche. We're not just taking your code and copying it up to the server. What we do is we build what we call a context. And it's based upon information we find inside the development environment. We send that request up, it's processed, and it's brought back. And it's never saved. It's never persisted. If you are concerned about something and it's really secret, then just don't use Copilot at all. You can turn it on and off within your environment, okay? But understand that whether you're using your GitHub Copilot for business or you're using your customers, that's based on who you're logged in as, and I'm going to show you that in Visual Studio in just a minute, then we don't keep your data at all. It's never kept. We don't persist it. Now, the little caveat, and I want to show this because people sometimes ask about it. If we go over here to my individual account, and let's switch back out to Brian. And if we go to my individual settings, this is only for individuals. This is not for businesses. There is an option. Oops, I picked the wrong one because I'm on Alex. Sorry, let me switch accounts to Brian. There we go. There we go. So this is for individuals. There is an option to help us. You can just turn this off. If you want to as an individual, you can choose, like you're doing open source and you don't mind. Let me just zoom in on that, right? Mm-hmm. This is only for individuals. If you use a business account, this does not even exist. We never keep it, okay?
Cool.
So as long as you're not using an individual account with this checkbox, then we never keep anything, all right? So just be very clear about that. On the other hand, if you're a business account, and again, I'm going to switch back to Alex. I'm going to show you for the business account, there's no such thing, right? It's just, it doesn't
Right.
exist.
So it's like automatically opting out,
Yep.
like we're not taking your data and doing anything with
Exactly. And that's also something that's documented in the Trust Center, and right on this page, down here, you go a little further down into the information here, public code filter, data excluded from training by default. Okay. So that means we only take enough of the context to perform the Copilot request. So that's the way it works today.
Cool. That is awesome.
Great. So Trust Center, take a look at that. And if you still can't get a good answer, fire it off. But again, if you're using business or enterprise, we don't keep your code. We never have, and we don't. Now, Visual Studio. Again, I love that. Keeping track of what's going on. I mean, boom, 17.10 shipped last week. And thankfully, the team wrote a blog post explicitly around just things they added related to Copilot. Now, I'm going to go through and show you this stuff, but I wanted you to see that there's this lovely blog post with a bunch of videos that Mark Downey and the team posted. We'll give you the link. I'm going to show you that in just a second, right? Mm-hmm. And then, obviously, the VS Code people have updates, and I've got some new stuff to talk about as well. So let's jump over to Visual Studio. I've done a bunch of talking, and let's just talk about what's new in GitHub Copilot in Visual Studio 17.10. So the first thing to do always is about Microsoft Visual Studio and make sure you're running the latest version. Now, again, latest version can mean a couple different things. Let's be clear, the latest GA version. Because Microsoft is always about, hey, let's keep the train going, right, Leslie?
Yeah.
And so there is a preview of 17.11 available. Okay?
There sure is. And even more if you're internal.
Let's not add to the
like, I mean, I gave a VS productivity talk while in Belgium at the conference we were both at, and like I was having to double check that everything I was presenting. I'm like, this is in 17.10, right? I don't know. I'm like in 17.11 preview 5 land right now. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
double check. It's kind of hard.
Absolutely crazy. So yeah. I'm only going to show you folks things that are available today to everybody, regular, non-preview. There's some new stuff, by the way. If you want to get on the 17.11, there's some new Copilot stuff in there that I'm not going to show, but I'll give you some tips on how to find it. So here's Visual Studio. So step 1 is that. Now, the first big change is that we no longer have 2 extensions. Copilot is now something you can install directly from the installer. So let's just fire up the installer. If I know how to type, there we go. And if you
come one of the hardest things to do in a demo, in my opinion.
Isn't it just typing? It's just horrible.
Yep. It's awful.
And if we go in here to individual components, if you type Copilot, you'll see right there under AI assistance, it's available. Okay. So this is what you want to do is install it if you haven't already done that. Okay. Before you had to go to the extensions. Nope. It's just something you do from the installer. When you do, you'll see it's now up here in the upper corner. Now, this has a green checkbox because I'm logged in. If you're not logged in, it'll be just a circle with nothing in it. So how do you get it logged in? Well, you just go to File, Account Settings, and this will tell you which GitHub client is being used or GitHub license is being used. Mm-hmm. So notice the flexibility here. I'm logged in with my Microsoft.com address to Visual Studio, but for GitHub for demoing over here, whoops, wrong control. There we go. I'm using Alex, right? So you can test different things out based upon your needs. And then I've also got some accounts logged in so I can get to Azure. But the things to check is, do you have the green check mark? If you don't, make sure your account's logged in. And then you'll notice some nice things here. We can have learn more. So get to docs, look at your license, and you can go to your settings. There are a lot of different settings that people don't even realize exist here when they go into Visual Studio. So notice enabling different things like the remote agents, preview features, exception assistant. So all these things are available for you to control when you work with it. All right. So it's worth spending some time to kind of, dare I say, read the fine manual, right? Take a look at what we're exposing for you. Particularly if you see a demo and someone does something you don't see it. Well, make sure you have that thing turned on. So that's the first, probably biggest change. Integrated into the product installer, one install, no extensions, and Copilot right up there at the top, letting you know how it's doing. Now, of course, if I want to use Copilot, the number one thing we did in the very beginning was we added statement completions. So I can come over here to, say, a book controller. And you'll notice if I come over here, I can just start typing. And then right away, I get that ghost text experience, right?
Mhm.
Now, when Copilot is installed, IntelliSense and those features kind of defer to Copilot where there can be conflicts, right? So because I have Copilot, this is what we call statement completion or text completion, or sometimes ghost completion or ghost text. And what it's telling you here is like says, okay, do you want this book service? Now that doesn't really make sense. So let's go. Let's see. How about string? Okay, a connection string. Maybe that's what you want. So this is the standard thing that you get. This is kind of that baseline feature. The next layer of Copilot, of course, is that I can come over here in chat and I can have a conversation. And one of the first things I can do is I can say, okay, let's do explain. And then I can do a pound sign. And this is really cool. I can say explain this file right here. Notice how bookcontroller.cs is the active document. So I can say explain what this file does. And I can start iterating through this particular file. I can say, okay, it's going to tell you about the constructor. It's going to tell me information about the different actions in here. And again, I just want to show you that these are kind of these baseline features we've had on the product for quite a bit. Now, that said, we've got some new cool stuff. So as you can expect, I'm using version control. And in fact, I have my code in Git. So I can come over here to Git and go to Manage Branches, and it's hooked up to GitHub.com. This feature doesn't care if it's on GitHub.com, by the way, or Azure DevOps or your own Git server. This is just a local Visual Studio enhancement. So how often have you come into commit history, Leslie, and you look at a commit and go, I don't know what's going on. And you look at it and you see something like this and go, add no cover file. Well, what does that mean? Okay.
Right.
Now, this one's easier kind of looking at it. It's got a file, but, sometimes it's not quite clear. So you'll notice right here in the history window, we've added a little bit of Copilot magic, the explain button. And this will go through and look, oh no. I think I found a little buglet. This happens occasionally with binary files. So let's just go to another one and we'll click explain here. It's going to look at the files that are in my commit. So if we scroll down a bit, you'll see I have 7 changes. And what it's going to do, let's try and make this a little bigger. I'm trying to, give you all the zoom capabilities I can. Now, there was actually quite a nice explanation here. Okay, but if there wasn't one, notice how I was able to ask Copilot what happened inside this commit right here. So this is a great new feature that's available now in 17.10 with Visual Studio and Copilot right there in the Git editor or Git repository viewer.
That's really cool because I know VS already has the ability to generate commits and generate PRs using Copilot. So now in the event people don't give you the detailed commit or PR that would really help you out from a communication standpoint, it's cool. You can just get Copilot to explain it for you.
Exactly. In fact, let's actually go change some code real quick. In fact, one of the things I often want to do is I want to do some data access. So you'll notice that this book controller, if we take a look, uses a book service, and then it uses an iSQL Server interface. So it looks like I'm talking to SQL Server. And in fact, you'll notice there's a database project. So what a lot of people don't realize is that one of the ways that Copilot can get smarter is for you to open up relevant documents in the document well, so you can use that as context to help build that information. So let's say, for example, I have this authors table. And if we go to store procedures, there's even one called get authors. So I'm going to open those up. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to create a new table. So I'm going to say add table. Oh, before I do this, I should probably get on a new branch, right? So let's do a new branch. Okay. Continue checkout. There we go. Okay, now I'm on a new branch. And I've got this table here, and it says get author. So I want something like that. So let's say, okay, add table. And of course, if we have authors and we have books, maybe we need publishers. So we'll do publishers. Okay, and you'll notice something interesting here. I've got an ID, and if we look at our authors table, it also has an ID. But I'd like it to be identity null. And I'm just going to do standard good old clipboard inheritance. So we'll just come over here. And let's see, did I do there? There we go. But now I want a publisher name. Now I want to show you what happened there. This is Copilot doing ghost text. Now, anybody who's watching who's ever used the SSDT tools in Visual Studio knows that an nvarchar 256 is not the standard thing that Visual Studio would pick. This is because it looked at what I've already done with authors and says, oh, it looks like you prefer an nvarchar 256 for your name field. And so I'm just going to take that, and then I'm going to come back and just make it to be publisher name. And of course, I had trouble typing, the usual. And there's my basic table, okay? Now, if I come over here then to the other part is I want to store procedure. So I'm going to add a new store procedure. And we'll call this get all publishers. Now, if we take a look here, I really don't need those parameters, so I'm going to get rid of those. But I now need to do this. Now watch what happens. We're going to get that standard statement completion from Copilot. It's looking at what I've already done and says, this looks like what you want to do. And there you go, right? It's able to look at some of the stuff I did over here. If we go over to look at get authors, that's the same kind of setup I did there. But now we're going to go a little crazier, okay? This was pretty simple. Let's go ask chat for some help. So if we go look over inside my data model, we'll see I have an iSQL Server class, or interface, excuse me, and then I have a SQL Server class that has implementation. So what I can do is I can say, you know what, Copilot, give me some help. And I can say, let's do this. We want to do the pound SQL Server for the file. I want to add a new method that uses SQL client to get all the publishers. Now, Copilot's going to start thinking. Now, I want to point out a couple of things. What it has done is it's looked at the existing code that I have here and followed the way I built it. If you look at what Copilot will normally do on a blank file, it'll normally lean towards EF Core because it'll lean towards a new style. Me being a bit of a curmudgeon, I prefer to use the old SQL client. And notice how it said, well, look, they get the connection string this way. I'm going to do the same thing here. You then set up the connection, you open it up, you put it into a reader, and you return it. And then it not only does this, it documents it. It says, this assumes the following things exist, blah, 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 blah. This is fantastic in how Copilot can guide me down the path to write code the way I write code. And this is kind of a critical thing here. People are concerned that, well, Copilot's going to give me bad code. You're right, it can. Garbage in breeds garbage out. Copilot will try and work the way you work. So if you have a style, open up those tabs, reference those documents, and tell it how you want to do it. Now, I want to show you one last thing that is really cool that I learned that they added in 17.10. More stuff coming, by the way. But as you'd assume, I might want to have some tests in here. And so if we come over and look at Solution Explorer, you'll see I have a test project. Now, one of the things I'm going to do first is I'm going to save this, and I'm going to make sure it builds. Give it a second. Go to output. Okay, it looks like no errors. I do have a warning. Now, warnings like this are kind of annoying, right? Because if you leave them alone, it creates technical debt. And I know some teams will even turn warnings into errors. Now, we got some new stuff coming in 17.11 to where we can actually ask Copilot to fix it from here. But I still can get some help. All I have to do is double click on it to take me to that code. And you'll see that there's this warning. So I'm just going to come over here and highlight it. And then I can either right click and say ask Copilot, or I can press the keystroke. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do, I'm just going to say fix this. Click the arrow button. Boom. And it basically shows me a nice inline diff window to show me the difference. And what it is, it's a very subtle case sensitivity issue.
Oh, yeah, because I actually didn't catch what the, the difference was.
Oh, yes. It's basically saying that they differ only in case, is what the message says. Yeah, I apologize. That's kind of tiny here, but the error was telling you this. But sometimes you're like, well, which thing is different than case? Well, let's have Copilot fix it, and now I'm good to go. So now that I've done that, oops, it's unexpected into file. Oh, I screwed up. There we go. Save. Okay. So now we're good there. But I have unit tests to run. So let's come over here to the test menu and run all tests. And this is going to bring over the test window, which I will unpop. Here we go. And there's the dreaded problem that you run into sometimes. It builds, but my tests fail.
Yeah.
And that brings sadness to my heart. So what happened here? Well, I'm going to come down here and expand and go find the failing test. And you'll notice all this different information. But notice, ask Copilot. We now have the ability to ask Copilot how we can fix this. Now, what's coming more is ask Copilot to fix it right there. You don't have to actually open up what I'm doing here. So we'll just put this back to the side. And we'll come over here and it's thinking. And it's going to go through and explain why this blew up.
Cool. Yeah, because I've definitely gotten Copilot to help me out with some tests in VS Code before. And sometimes I'll just like copy paste the text failed error and nothing else. And then it'll just be like, oh yeah, it's XYZ. Yeah, just fix it by doing this. Here's some sample code if you want to use it. Yeah.
So this is fantastic because it tells me why, and it says, oh, it turns out you passed null reference, and oh, I do have a null reference. And of course, that means if I go to the book controller, it's expecting to have valid instances passed in construction. Now, this is where I have to rethink it, because what it'll do is I can say, well, can you suggest a fix for my test? Okay, so it's going to show me the parameters.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows me that it's renamed some fields is one way. And the other thing I can say is, remember, I'm having a conversation. I can say, could I use mock classes instead? And there you go. And it says, okay, yeah, you can set up mock classes. So this is the other thing to do is when you talk about talking to Copilot, there's what we call no shot, where you just ask a random question, and that sets the base context for the conversation. Understand the back end is meant to be worked with, right? Not just occasionally brought in. The one way to think about this when we talk about it is, right, I'm the pilot, GitHub Copilot is the Copilot. We work together, and it's very much a pair programming situation. So, give it a little bit of love. So those are a couple things I want to show. I'm super excited about what's coming out, but there's more out there. So let's jump back over to my list of links.
Sweet.
And
do you have one question in chat real quick while we transition?
Absolutely.
So this is a question about the model, kind of going behind the scenes a little bit. So like, how often does GitHub train the existing knowledge of the model, especially because there's constantly new JS libraries and other new libraries and syntax that are coming out every month?
Yes. So that's a great question. And we don't have a regular timeline. In other words, it's not like it's done every week, every 2 weeks, every month. It's done all the time. We're constantly working with our partners, like people at OpenAI, Microsoft, et cetera, to improve the product. And that means it improves both the experience inside the IDE. It improves the experience of the responses coming back and the way we do the backend processing. One of the things we do is RAG, a retrieval augmented generation. And then there is the backend that we leverage for the different model information. So the actual model, there's the model support technology, like Azure has something we call responsible AI. We use that as part of Copilot. So it's not crazy for me to say we update it every week. We're always updating. Now, how often do we retrain the model? We don't currently document that. That's not something we share publicly. In fact, I'll tell you right now, I don't know. I do know when major occurrences occur, we will talk about it. And currently we're leveraging actually both GPT-3.5, GPT-4, and I believe some of the new stuff, depending upon the context of the question, the IDE, and all the things going on. In other words, there's definitely a big depends. It isn't just one model that we're always using all the time. And so one of the things to do is to not necessarily get too caught up in the model and just understand that you're using Copilot as a service, and we're always working to make it better through our partnerships.
Sweet. Good question.
Great. You know what? Real quick, did I make any changes? I was just going to show this. Yes, I did a couple of changes. Right. So the one thing I want to show in case people haven't seen this, and one thing I want to point out is because this is an example where the team really listens. Now, I don't assume that they only listen to me. I know other people told them about this. But
they
one
only
of the things
listen
you
to
can
you.
do,
that's it. Like any issues that you send, those are the P0, not even P0, just like P-1. We had to do it yesterday.
So I started using this feature when it was a preview, and I gave the team some feedback. And what this feature is you'll notice that there's this nice little add AI generated commit. Let me zoom in and let's get that little right here, this little pencil. And when you click it, what it will do is I'll say, these are the files I'm changing. It will go look at all the files, create a context. It'll send it to Copilot, and they'll analyze it. The larger the commit, it might take a little longer because they're trying to understand the relationship between the files that you have and the changes that you made to the active solution. Now, once it's done, it's going to generate a nice commit message. And here's the beauty. One of the things we like to have when we do Git commits, the general best practice is to use 50 to 70 characters in a single sentence to summarize what the commit is all about. And then when necessary, you provide additional information. And so that extra initial sentence, I will say that I at least asked for it, and to see it just brings joy to my heart. So thank you, team. You're awesome. And now, so I got this commit message so that I've actually committed. It's a reasonable description about what I did. And of course, I can enhance it. I can separate lines, etc. And in fact, you know what? Let's actually push this up so that we can actually have a pull request so we can show some stuff on github.com. Sound good?
Yeah. And this is honestly like my favorite kind of use case for Copilot, for GitHub Copilot. Just taking something that it can be kind of tedious, like writing a commit message, and especially writing a good commit message that's detailed and helps your team out instead of just this afterthought, and being able to do a lot of that legwork for you. I think that's really nice and sets a good precedent of like, let's have more detailed commits, and it doesn't take that long to do now. So
yeah, I'm totally with you there. And again, it's remove the mundane, right? We need good commit messages, right?
Yeah.
No one would argue about that. But, you know, we're busy and we're trying to get stuff done. And yes, I know I could have wrote exactly that. There's no question I can do it. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to replace me in the job because no one cares if I can write a good commit message. They care if I can write good code with my tools. And that's what we're doing. And so, yes, remove the mundane, focus on moving the product forward. So, yeah, that's a great new feature that if you've been using older versions of VS, another reason to upgrade to the latest 17.10 of Visual Studio, and actually, sorry, 17.10.1 of Visual Studio 2022. So let's go back, and I want to show you a couple more things for information, and then I'm going to show you some stuff on github.com. So going back over here to Edge, I showed you that link. I'm going to skip over a couple things here, and I'm going to go right to here. So here I'm logged in as Octobrian, and you'll notice that up in the corner, there is a Copilot icon. When you see the Copilot icon in GitHub, that means you're leveled up on your Copilot license to where you have Copilot Enterprise. And again, one way to check this out is to click your Copilot, and you'll see GitHub Copilot Enterprise is active. Now, if I switch over here to DevRel Labs, what we can do is do a refresh. And what we should see is that over on our branches here, there's that feature that was pushed up by Alex Damone. So if we switch over to my other browser and we go over into Alex's tab view, you'll see we got this ability to compare and create a pull request. So let's click compare and pull request. And you'll see we have this nice information. Now, because I only had one commit, we will take the default commit message. Okay, we'll shove that in there. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, most of the time people have 4 or 5 commits, and they end up with a blank space like this. Well, this is where Copilot Enterprise is out to help you, as well as Visual Studio, which is I can create a summary right here inside my browser. Okay?
Yep. And you can also do that in VS as well.
And you can also do that in Visual Studio. And so what's nice about this is, first of all, why this is great is if you're a Visual Studio user, you have a choice. But let's say you're using an IDE or tool like, okay, I'm not picking on it, but Apple's Xcode. It doesn't currently allow us to have Copilot in there. Mm-hmm. But we know lots of people use GitHub.com and Xcode. This is going to be a lifesaver for that. Yeah. If you take a look at how it does it, it even sets up links and everything for you. So this is a really nice way to generate a pull request when you don't have an IDE that has integration to do that for you. So we really like this. I can request that Octobrian take a look at this, and I can create the pull request. Now, if I come over here to my other user, my Octobrian person, we go to pull requests. We can drop in there, and it says it's requesting a review. So I can come in here and I can go, okay, great. Let's add my review. And I can come in here, and one of the things I can do is you'll notice that Copilot's hanging out over here that will explain things to me. So for example, I can say, explain what this is doing. So we'll come over here. Oh, I can add a comment. Sorry, that's not what I want to do. I want to come over here, get the highlight, and I click the drop down and I can say explain. And what this will do is explain exactly what was going on in that piece of code. So if you don't know T-SQL, guess what? It's going to explain exactly what it's doing here for you right away and making it straightforward. And so I can use this as I go through and do my pull request process. So these are a couple features that are available in GitHub Copilot when you're using it as part of your enterprise experience at github.com. And yes, this is an example where you do need to have your code in github.com to take advantage of it. Now, if I switch back over to Alex, one of the things that also is troublesome sometimes is you'll come into a repo like this one, and you're like, what's going on in here? And so I can come over to Copilot and say, can you explain what this app does? Okay, so it's saying I'm looking at the README. I can tell you that. And I can say, okay, that's good. And I can say, well, can you tell me what version of .NET it's using?
The suspense.
It's using .NET 8. And it was found through the README by looking at the text. And I then can go into the code, and I can also ask it for information about that. So I can work in the context of my environment and get information. But I got one last little tip I'm going to show you. You'll notice there is a book here. When I click the book, this gives me access to what we call knowledge bases. Knowledge bases allow us to index and build information about .md and MDX files inside your repos, as well as to look at the code so you can ask questions about other code that's not directly in the repo. So one of the things I can do is I can search internal docs, and I can say, do we have guidance on naming SQL Server objects?
Also, can you zoom in a tab in your browser?
Absolutely. Let me do this, and I'm going to press the right keystroke, I hope. let me do Zoom with. Okay. So you'll see what it did was it said, I asked about the app functionality, and it's going through and giving me information about how we should name things. It talks about rules. And you'll note that if I come up here to the top, these are links to the documentation in a completely different repo inside my organization. So this gave me internal documentation information. And again, I can come over and switch. I can say, well, give me information about Microsoft's open source docs. And so if we look at the repositories it's indexing, it's got information about TypeScript, .NET Core, ASP.NET Core, C# language, etc. So I can say, for example, how do I create a record in C#? Oops, I clicked the wrong button. And what I want to do is go to ... And give me a second. And you'll notice it provided the documentation right there about how I can go through and create a record. And it got it from the source, from the C# documentation. And then you can also take your conversation immersive, and this will let you see more of the information as opposed to just in that window. So those are just some of the things we have in Copilot today when you use Copilot Enterprise. One of the big things that's on our backlog and in early private preview with a few customers is what we call fine-tune models. And this will allow you to create a fine-tune model on your code base that you then can share with your team, etc.
Awesome.
So I know we're getting close to time, so I want to just highlight a couple other great references for you to get more about this, which is, we announced a couple new things at Build. Oh, dear. How about building your own extensions for GitHub Copilot? That's right.
Yay.
You can build extensions that integrate with Copilot both inside the browser as well as inside any surface supported by Copilot. Yes, that's right. Inside Visual Studio and inside Visual Studio Code and our other wonderful IDEs. So you want to take a look at this blog post from our senior product officer, Mario Rodriguez. I'm sure I butchered his title. Mario got a promotion. He's leading the vision at GitHub right now on this, and he talks about extensions in here, what they are, how to get started. We got some great videos there. If you go to the marketplace, you'll see now we have a Copilot Marketplace, and this allows you to try some of the new marketplace Copilot extensions from the marketplace in your accounts. Finally, we also have this thing called Copilot Workspace. Now, you'll note that extensions are in limited beta. Those are coming from the product team. Those are things we're ready for you to get started on, so sign up, get started. Copilot Workspace is a new feature thing, magical thing that our
crazy
Copilot Next team is working on. And the Copilot Next team we don't have a vision yet for exactly how it's going to be a product. But we're looking for people to give us feedback. You can sign up for the technical preview. It might take a while for you to get on it, but once you do, you can try this out. Now, I'm going to go show a demo of this as my last thing, but I covered a lot of stuff. Extensions, you want to learn how to build them. There's two great talks from Build, one extending GitHub Copilot, which talks more about the server side, and another one, which is enhancing VS Code extensions with GitHub Copilot, which is VS Code. Then there's also a demo by Neha, who's our VP of Engineering. She shows Copilot Workspace in greater action. And finally, you should probably watch the keynote where Satya says Copilot a bunch of times. But he also talks about it.
Take a shot every time he says Copilot.
No. That kind of tradition. We're not going to do that.
No, wouldn't recommend.
So I want to show this last little wonderful thing, which is using Copilot Workspace. So I'm going to come back over here to DevRel Labs, and I'm going to come over to that repository that I was working in. Now, if I come over to Visual Studio, I'm going to close all the open files. So we're going to close all those documents. And I'm going to come over here and get back onto main. And I'm going to run the app real quick. And this app is an ASP.NET MVC app running on ASP.NET Core with the 8.0 runtime, talking to a SQL Server database. So it is, a tour de force of programming magic. And we're going to do something simple. right? Because I know C#, I know T-SQL, I don't know CSS. And so notice how this button is blue. I want the button to be a different color. And Leslie, to prove that this is not smoke and mirrors, you're going to choose the color.
Oh gosh.
Think something bright and bold. Now, the way I'm going to do this is when you have the preview installed for Copilot Workspace, you get a new Copilot tab right here on the code. And I can say, change the view inventory button on the home page to what color?
Cerulean.
What?
I'm testing it.
How about
cerulean? Okay, purple's cool.
Okay.
I don't know how advanced you get with the colors or not. Cerulean's a
okay.
pretty shade of blue.
So I need to sign in with my Octobrian account. And I'm going to continue. And this is going to launch the preview of Copilot Workspace. Now, what it's doing is it's taking a look at my code and trying to figure out how it's going to do that. So it currently says it's being styled by CSS with button primary. And it's telling me that the color change can be applied with a new CSS class. Great. Generate a plan to do this for me. So it's going to go through and look at this. It's going to replace button primary with button purple. It's going to add a new class. And I'm going to tell it to do it. Give it a go. Now, there is an option that says new session. So if I wanted to, I can open this up inside a code space and I can play with it live. The thing, though, is I prefer that to be a Visual Studio developer. So I'm going to show you how we're going to see the results here. So we're going to let it do its work. I'm going to kind of look at it and go, that looks pretty reasonable. Almost done with the CSS. It's updating that. You'll see it's going through the lines.
Mm-hmm.
And this looks pretty good. So what I'm going to have it do is create a pull request. And notice how Copilot's writing the summary and everything it's doing.
Yeah.
I'm going to click Create Pull Request. And of course, because it did a pull request, it's going to have a branch. So all I have to do is come over to Visual Studio. I'm going to come over here and do a fetch. I'm going to open up my remotes. And we see that it created a branch under Octobrian. I'm going to switch to that branch. And I'm going to run my application. Could it be possible that this will work?
Fingers crossed.
Control F5. There
Check
you go.
it.
The purple button. So
I like cerulean myself, but purple's still pretty good.
Okay. Well, in either case, that was just a preview. And now rewinding back to things, I want to, my call to action for you is really straightforward. Number one, take a look at all the links I provided. They all have value for you. Number two, if you don't have Copilot, give it a shot. Sign up for the free trial. All right. If you have Copilot and you don't use it, maybe you're like, it's there, but it doesn't help me. Give it another try. Make sure you're on the latest IDE, in this case, Visual Studio 2022 17.10.1, or the latest VS Code, or take a look at our partner IDs from JetBrains or NeoVim. Make sure you have the latest extension installed and give things a go. If you're interested in building extensions, sign up for the beta. If you're interested in using them, try out some of the ones from our partners. And finally, sign up for Workspace, but understand Workspace is out there. It's a dream right now. But we want you to be involved in all of our dream making, to give us feedback and tell us what you like, what you don't like. Maybe if you're a Visual Studio user, you want to have a button that says Preview in Visual Studio as opposed to CodeSpace. The bottom line is we build things for you and ourselves, right? So we need to know what you want, right? And Leslie, you can attest to this as being on the Visual Studio team.
Totally.
We're here to make users happy.
Yeah. Real people look at your feedback, I promise, both on the GitHub side and in the Microsoft side. Your feedback, if we didn't have it, we wouldn't have half of the tools that we demo on this show in particular, at all. So keep it coming. Feel free to be brutally honest. We can take it.
Yep. Nope.
Yeah.
That's the way we get better. Give us the feedback.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know Workspaces in particular, I'm excited to see where that goes. Just from a planning standpoint, I think that's the piece that interests me the most. oh my gosh, like help me generate this idea that I have in my mind of like coming to fruition.
Totally. And I just did a teaser. So watch the videos to see what else you can do. Neha's Keynote video does some much more magical things. But I wanted to show you it's going to be something that one way or another you can use the Visual Studio, even if it doesn't have that direct click there. It's still going to be valuable for all of our developers. Are there any other questions we want to answer before we sign off?
There are some questions in the chat, but I think we have time for maybe one before we wrap things up. But if we didn't get to your question, can people reach out to you on Twitter/X?
Yep. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Brian Randell. You'll find me there. Same thing on Mastodon. And you can email me at octobrian@github.com. Just to understand, I get thousands of email messages, so that'll probably take a couple more days, but I'll do my best to answer. Please just tell me, hey, I was watching the Visual Studio Toolbox episode to provide me with some context of your question. I'd appreciate that.
Excellent. Also, I'm really jealous of your username. That's such a good username, Octobrian.
It was just double luck that I was able to get it, so thank you.
It's pretty good. Cool. So last question of the day. Can Copilot scan a Python package and understand its methods and functions instead of relying on old data?
So I don't know Python really well. So I'm gonna tell you a story as an answer, and then you'll have to try it out. So back when I was first using Copilot, before we had chat, and I was using the statement completion and the ghost text, I was programming against a NuGet package. So a NuGet package is similar to like a PyPy package in that it has external code that I was using to talk to, of all things, GitHub. And I was trying to do a particular type of device authentication. I had searched, I couldn't find any good help. Copilot is able to look at the NuGet package and use that as input to help me write the code. In other words, it looked at the methods. So if Python and what you're talking about is similar, then yes, it can. It will look at the things you're referencing to help you build the answer. That said, it also will look at the model, but it does try and look at the current environment first to create the context. So hopefully that answers your question. And I apologize that I'm just not a Python expert.
Cool, no worries. Sweet. So thank you everyone for your questions. And as Brian just mentioned, feel free to reach out to him via X, Mastodon, Twitter, the X formerly known as Twitter, whatever.
Yeah, X formerly known as Twitter. Yeah, just my first last name, Brian Randell, or octobrian@github.com is my email.
Sweet. Well, Brian, thank you so much for sharing. That was a lot of great information. I think hopefully we all got a good scope of where Copilot is at, and such a short amount of time too. Like if you watched all of Build, then I'm sure you got all this, but if you didn't, like I didn't have time to because I was hosting, you didn't have time to because you're doing booth duty. Like this is a nice condensed, here's what you missed.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's why I want to put those talks up there, because I couldn't even if I wanted to demo them, I couldn't have gone into it. And I'm just learning the extensibility. So it's better to hear it from the devs that have actually built the feature. So watch those extension talks, watch Neha's demo, get yourself excited, but then better yet, go back and do what I did. Get the existing bits and use Copilot as your Copilot. It's not there to replace you. It's there to help you.
Yep, totally. It's a Copilot, not a pilot.
There you go.
Sweet. Well, Brian, thank you so much. Thank you to all the viewers who are watching. If you are coming from Twitch watching this, I know we intersected a little bit with the community stand-up that was happening. So no worries. This is a video that's going to be on demand right after we end this live show. So you can always go back and check things out. And yeah, so thanks everyone. So happy coding. Till next time.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for having me.